Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to That D Plus Show. Class is in session for the only show from that nerdy site that lets you know what kind of quality to expect right from the name. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and each week we dive into a different Disney Plus offering and discuss its history, how it holds up today, and our general impressions. If you like the show, we would love it if you like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. Joining me today, we have Cameron Abbott. How you doing, Cameron?
Trevor, after this evening, I want you to never speak to me or my son ever again.
Fair enough. It's going to make the future of this website a little weird, but okay. And also joining us, we have Frank Bazzani. How you doing, Frank?
Doing good. I'm excited to talk about Boba Fett with y'all. I don't think it's going to come across on the camera, but I broke out my Boba Fett Star Wars shirt.
Nice.
Nice.
This is the one I forgot to wear to Disneyland that I was talking about, but we saw a guy that had one that was like vaguely similar, which was really funny.
Very cool. And then, yes, not only does Cameron have a Grogu, but I also have a Grogu here by my side. I don't have a easy way to like keep him in frame because if I just like set him on the couch behind me, he's just probably going to fall over. But we'll see. We'll see. Go, just hang out there, Grogu. And I just will not lean back. And it'll just kind of be like creeping behind me the whole episode. So yeah,
It's like he's in your backpack. It's like you're running around on like Dagobah.
exactly, yeah. So this episode is going to be all about the first season of the Book of Boba Fett. Obviously, was it you and me, Cameron, that did the first episode back when that
I believe
aired?
so.
Okay.
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah. No, actually, it might have been Logan. Yeah, no, it was me and Logan, I think.
Oh, was he? Oh, I think I was supposed to be on it, but
Yeah, I
was
think you
sick
had
or
like
something?
I think you had like work kept you busy or something.
Oh,
last
yeah.
minute.
Yeah, makes sense. Mhm.
So yeah, Logan and I hopped on, talked about the first episode of that, 6-7 weeks ago or whatever. And I think our general impressions of the first episode were, well, this is a weird show, like weird way to start this show with the like split, like the present timeline and then kind of the reverse or the like. Let's go back to Boba Fett escaping the Sarlacc pit of the timeline, and we predicted that was going to be like, okay, it's probably going to have like the split, timeline throughout the arc of the series. Nope, they just kind of dropped that halfway through and picked up a completely different thing with the Mandalorian for the rest of it. So it was a very weird show, but we're going to talk all about that. So diving into the why did we pick it? Of course, it is the thing to talk about right now, as it has just wrapped up. So let's get in on that SEO goodness. A little bit of the history lesson on this. Of course, originally released here starting in December 29th of 2021, all the way through February 9th, 2022, this past week. Total of 7 episodes, which ranged with a runtime between about 38 minutes to the finale there that was just over an hour, 61 minutes. Now, admittedly, some of that is like the extended Disney Plus credits that go through like every region and stuff. So like probably chop off like 3 to 4 minutes of like each of those episodes. But in the Star Wars TV timeline of things, we of course had The Mandalorian season 2 that ran from October to December of 2020. We had The Bad Batch season 1 that ran from May to August of last year, 2021. We had Visions that came out in September of 2021. We have here the Book of Boba Fett, December of 2021 through February 2022. We have Obi-Wan Kenobi is the next series on the docket, which I believe just got like a date announced for May 25th to coincide with the 45th anniversary of Star Wars coming up. It was either going to be that or May the 4th was probably when that one was going to hit, and based on the poster I saw kind of floating around the other day, it looks like they landed on May 25th. And then also sometime this year we're supposed to have the Andor series on Cassian Andor, and I imagine we're probably going to get more Bad Batch, maybe if not this year, then like next year.
There's also supposed to be a Ahsoka at some point, right? Is that this year?
I think Ahsoka is in the time frame for this year. I mean, there's so many like Star Wars projects in the TV Disney Plus space, because of course, obviously, as a lot of this series ends up setting up, we're going to have a Mandalorian season 3 as well. So a little bit of the roll call. Over the course of the 7 episodes here, we had 5 different directors. Robert Rodriguez directed the first, third, and finale, final episodes. Of course, he had done the Mexico trilogy of El Mariachi, Desperado, Once Upon a Time in Mexico, as well as From Dusk Till Dawn, The Faculty, Spy Kids, Sin City, Machete, and Alita Battle Angel, among a myriad of other projects. Steph Green directed the second episode of The Tribes of Tatooine. She has a lot of she comes in and does an episode or two of a series. Some notable series that I saw were The Americans, the Watchmen series from HBO a couple years back, the L Word, A Generation Q, and The Man in the High Castle. Kevin Tancharoen did episode 4, The Gathering Storm. He kind of made a little bit of a name for himself with the Mortal Kombat Rebirth and Legacy series of, I believe, web videos kind of stuff. He was also a director for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And has directed a ton of things in kind of the both in the MCU there with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and he also directed an episode of The Inhumans, the short-lived bad Inhumans series.
Oh,
And then he's done a lot in the CW verse with episodes of Arrow, The Flash, DC Legends of Tomorrow, and maybe Supergirl. I don't remember if that was in there or not. Bryce Dallas Howard directed the episode 5, Return of the Mandalorian. She, of course, has done a couple episodes of The Mandalorian. She is slated to direct an upcoming remake of The Flight of the Navigator. A film there. Of course, she is probably best known for her acting stuff, including the Jurassic World trilogy, which we just got a trailer for Jurassic World Dominion coming up. But yeah, she's knocking it out of the park here in the directing realm. And then Dave Filoni directed episode 6, From the Desert Comes a Stranger. Of course, has his work directing episodes of Avatar: The Last Airbender, and then predominantly, of course, Star Wars: The Clone Wars, Star Wars Rebels, The Mandalorian, kind of being one of the creative directors of this era of Star Wars. Jon Favreau was the writer kind of across the series, of course, having written Swingers, Chef, as well as The Mandalorian. And he is also slated to one of the other Disney Plus Star Wars projects coming up. He's slated to also write at least the pilot episode of The Rangers of the New Republic. And I believe Dave Filoni is also slated to write the upcoming Ahsoka series. Starring, we have Tamura Morrison as, of course, Boba Fett. He's been playing Django / Boba Fett / various clones since Attack of the Clones in 2002. Ming-Na Wen playing Fennec Shand, known as Chun-Li from Street Fighter, Mulan. She was in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. She made her debut as Fennec Shand in The Mandalorian, and has also played the role in The Bad Batch. Matt Berry is in here. When we did the first episode, he was credited on IMDb as UK2B, which I'm realizing in hindsight is probably just a nod about him being British and a to be or not to be bit. He is currently credited as 8D8. So I assume that is his actual his droid's designation. Or IMDb is just continuing to lie to me. But he is known from projects like the IT Crowd, or the IT Crowd. I don't know. I never know which one it is.
it's the IT Crowd.
The
yeah.
IT
Yeah,
Crowd.
IT.
Because it's a pun off of the It Crowd.
Yeah. And I knew it was about IT, but he also does The Toast of London and What We Do in the Shadows, the Disenchantment series, and I highlighted this when we talked about him in the first episode. He was the grifting professor in an episode of Community, so shout out to him. He basically plays Boba Fett's droid there in in Jabba's palace. David Pasquesi, who I had included in the credits from the first episode because he was in it, ended up being a way bigger presence throughout the series than I was anticipating from that first episode. But he is Mak Shaiz's major domo, best known from projects like Veep and At Home with Amy Sedaris. Jennifer Beals was in there as Garza Fwip, of course, from projects like Flashdance, The L Word, The Book of Eli. And then
we should make a point of notice though. Actually, what's his name? The Major Domo guy. He's strangers. There's a weird Strangers with Candy like callback between a couple between what's her name from
I mean, that's like I have it in the trivia of like they have because he one of his projects is At Home with Amy Sedaris, so like they have a long history of working together on projects and stuff, and so their little like twosome kind of bit at the end of the series here seems very much like a callback to kind of their long history of working relationship.
Although I just want to give a shout out to Strangers with Candy because that's an underappreciated show.
I have it here in the upcoming credits here, because now we get into like a flurry of little like additional cameos. Of course, Pedro Pascal as the Mandalorian, from The Mandalorian, from Game of Thrones, from Narcos, from Wonder Woman 84. Rosario Dawson there as Ahsoka Tano, from, again, kind of introduced to the role in The Mandalorian. She also worked on projects like Josie and the Pussycats, Men in Black 2. You can see her currently in Dying Light 2, Stay Human, which Cameron is playing through.
Haven't met her yet.
Haven't met her yet? Wow,
nope.
She must get introduced like very late in the story based on how many episodes you've recorded.
But yes, the reason is because of how many episodes. Like I've gotten really into the game and all the episodes that I've recorded.
I mean, didn't you say we'll talk about it off air? She is like the celebrity star kind of thing of the game, so she presumably plays some kind of significant role in it. Timothy Olyphant as Cobb Vanth, who got introduced as that character from The Mandalorian, but it also has been in things like Justified and Deadwood and the Hitman movie.
I love him so much, especially in Mandalorian and this Book of Boba Fett. Like his martial character is so awesome. Like he's such a great fit for this universe and like the space western vibe.
Yeah, it's like it's like, hey, we want you to do your like Justified martial character. We wanted you to do it in space, and actually, you don't even have to be that much of a hard ass. You can be kind of like this, like more desperado type character.
Yeah,
and like, oh my gosh, he is so great. Also, Timothy Olyphant. Like no joke, one of my favorite like actors, but also a big crush of mine. Like he is just so dreamy and handsome. He's just like aged he has aged so perfectly. Like it's just not fair to the rest of the human race that he has aged just so finely, because he went from being just like a handsome hunk, like heartthrob, to being like your friend's dad who you really want to fuck.
Okay. I'll take your word for it. I mean, that is like in his cameo in The Office, that's basically like the same vibes he kind of puts off. Everybody's like, blown away by how attractive he is as the on the road salesman or whatever.
He's the perfect definition of a silver fox. He's so handsome.
There you go. Amy Sedaris in here returning as...
I said some bad words to my son. I'm sorry, son.
Amy Sedaris returning as Peli Motto, again, who was originally introduced in The Mandalorian. Of course, probably best known for her work on Strangers with Candy, as well as the series At Home with Amy Sedaris. Stephen Root having a weird little pop-up role as Lortha Peel, of course best known as the Red Stapler guy from Office Space, as well as the series News Radio and Barry. Danny,
he is incredible in News Radio. I rewatched a clip recently of News Radio that he was in, and it's just like, my God, this guy was just so perfect.
I mean, he's great in a lot of the things. He's been a great character actor for like probably most of my life. So yeah. Danny Trejo, of course, also with a cameo here as the Rancor Keeper. Most other credits including Animal Talking, that lovely little Animal Crossing talk show that Gary Whitta put on, of course, as well as Machete and Spy Kids and any number of other projects. Corey Barton, reprising his role as Cad Bane, which he has been doing since the end of season 1 of the Clone Wars,
beginning of season
2, whatever.
Season 2.
Whenever he basically like hijacks the council. Most recently, he had played Cad Bane in The Bad Batch. He's also Moliere in Atlantis, as well as Hugo Strange in Batman Arkham City. And then lastly, we have, Mark Hamill popping back in as Luke Skywalker, of course, from, has been Luke Skywalker since Star Wars A New Hope. He was also, of course, iconically the Joker in many Batman things, including the Arkham games and Batman the Anime Series. And he's just had a good long career that Mark Hamill has.
Quick question. I heard something about Mark Hamill being this might be a trivia later, but like he actually didn't voice anything. They used like a voice synthesizer or something like to like piece together his line.
So they've done this. They've done this with when they brought him back in at the end of The Mandalorian, and they did it again here. He voices the lines, but obviously his voice has changed drastically in the course of the 45 years, so he can't really be the Luke that we hear and would think of from this era anymore. So what they've done is they in addition to kind of like using all the the camera trickery to de-age him and kind of create the young version of Luke, they've also done the same thing on the voice scale, where they kind of mix his performance with like recordings of his voice from that time and finding like the right syllables and kind of blending it all together. So it is like an AI synthesized version of his performance, but it is like he's out there. He delivered the lines to give like the inflection and stuff like that. But they to de-age his voice, they do a lot of like AI trickery with that as well, kind of pouring through like archival footage and interviews and stuff like that of him. I think kind of circa that time period.
It makes sense, but I also found like some of the lines he delivered, like I'm guessing it's just because of the effect. Like unfortunately, it comes off as like robotic sometimes.
Yeah, it's like flat.
It's
yeah.
I mean, like I hear the criticism, and I think one of the things we talked about, I think when we've talked about these kinds of things on the show in the past, I think we talked about this a little bit with maybe in Logan's episode as well, is like it's a lot more noticeable if you're looking for that kind of stuff. But if you're not paying attention to it, it's like I describe it as like when I saw the Batman v Superman thing, or not when I saw like Justice League the first time, like I didn't know which scenes had Henry Cavill's like mustache removed and stuff like that, because I was immersed in other elements of the story, or the best example I always give is when I saw like Rogue One with my family. They didn't know that like Governor Tarkin in that movie was like, CG or whatever. They just thought they'd found like a guy who looked enough like him and put him in makeup. And so like, if you're in the know and the effect to look for it, you're going to see it a little bit easier. But there is an uncanny valleyness of the voice as well. That absolutely, I think people, are catching. But it was one of the things, like, it wasn't until a few days after the Mandalorian finale from season 2 came out that, like, that story even started to break, because everybody was just so blown away by, like, the effect of Mark Hamill looking younger. They didn't realize that they had, like, also done something to his voice to, make his voice occur. So I think this time around, in part because he's so much more present in that episode that he's in, there's just more of him to like catch those things. But yes, they did kind of have to manipulate his performance.
I mean, hey, like I'm not hating on it. Like they made movie magic. They made like they use like a younger actor, the performance of Mark Hamill to deliver us a young Luke Skywalker. Like great. But I am also in that camp of like, honestly, like just get Sebastian Stan in a wig, put him in there. I think you could do it. Yeah. But here's the thing. Either way, I win.
There you go.
Either way, I win. So like, because I like this, and I also like the idea of the other thing, because I also like the idea of like legacy roles. Like Trevor, you and I have talked in lots of length about that.
Yeah. So. Diving into additional trivia here in the galactic timeline of things. This happens effectively between the years 4 ABY, i.e. the aftermath of the Sarlacc pit and kind of Boba's time in the desert with the Tuskens, and then the modern timeline of stuff is in 9 ABY for the current day stuff after Boba Fett and Fennec have taken over Jabba the Hutt's kind of territory. The Tusken Raiders capture Boba following his escape from the Sarlacc pit. They are later shown riding banthas in single file to hide their numbers, just as Obi-Wan tells Luke Skywalker in Star Wars: New Hope. Black Chrysanthemum is pulled in from the Dr. Aphra comics / novel. In kind of the chronology of events, he had previously been hired by Jabba to kidnap Owen Lars for not paying his water tax. Obi-Wan rescued Owen and fought Black Chrysanthemum, scarring him with his lightsaber. And seeing this makes me very curious if we will actually see that play out in live action over the course of the upcoming Obi-Wan series, because
It'd be sick.
both Ewan McGregor and Joel Edgerton, I think, who is Owen Lars, are like in that series. So it seems like a fitting thing to include. And now that Black Chrysanthemum has been like introduced in the like visual medium or film medium, it'd be another perfect thing to kind of like bridge the gaps of all these series and connective tissue, a la what we got so much of in this one, of like, oh yeah, we get to see a younger Black Chrysanthemum in that. Black Chrysanthemum was also later hired by Darth Vader to track down an agent of the Emperor. Mos Pelgo, being renamed Freetown, is, much like Cobb Vanth, drawn directly from the Aftermath Star Wars books. So if you like that character, there is a trilogy of Chuck Wendig books out there where you can get a little bit more on Cobb Vanth. And this is more of a Mandalorian season 2 bit of trivia, but like even Cobb Vanth kind of like having Boba's armor at one point is pulled directly from that series. If that's not the Quacta calling the stifling slimy, which Cad Bane says to Boba in the finale, it's also something that Boba Fett said to Sasha Banks' character in Mandalorian season 2, basically verbatim that line. So it is one of those Star Wars ass kinds of things that they're trying to establish. Much like we get nerf herders shown throughout this series. In the Luke episode, when he's doing like his jumps and flips and stuff, he jumps on a creature and then kind of like goes flipping off of it in the water, and the creature like comes up like big water buffalo kind of thing. That's a nerf.
Yep.
So
I couldn't believe it when they showed that. I was like, oh my gosh, is that a nerf? And I looked it up. I was like, they put a nerfs in here.
Yep.
So it turns out
also
Luke ends up becoming a shaggy-headed nerf herder on his temple planet. There you go.
Additionally, the like the butcher shop that we see the Mandalorian in at the beginning of episode 5 is like basically it's from the concept art that kind of plays at the end of the episode. Those are supposed to be basically like nerf meat. So it's a nerf butchery.
That's awesome. I love that. More like, here's the thing. Like we went to Galaxy's Edge, which was awesome. But literally, like most of the things that were really cool there were just like the immersive aspects of Star Wars. Give me more of that. Give me like nerf butcheries. Give me like all that sort of stuff. Just like, yes, there's so much about this universe that just like feels like it could be so much better if they did more to let people feel like they lived in it. And it's phenomenal.
Yeah. I'll be very curious to see what eventually gets introduced or shown off as Quacta or Stiflings, because clearly they're going to be slimy. The Scorponok Annihilator droids are yet another kind of thing that is pulled into this new continuity out of Legends canon. They are we see them obviously in the finale here, and are seemingly derived from prequel era concept art, specifically I believe Attack of the Clones. Pelimoto's rickshaw in the finale mirrors the one that Anakin and Padme rode in Attack of the Clones, also through Tatooine. We get, of course, an iconic Wilhelm scream when the Rancor throws one of the pikes. Yeah, my last little note here: Pelimoto as and the mayor's major domo is a reunion for Amy Sedaris and David Piscesi, from Strangers with Candy, At Home with Amy Sedaris, all their various projects over the years. So that is what I got here for trivia. So let's dive in. What did we think of the Book of Boba Fett as a series? Frank, let's throw to you first.
I liked it. I didn't like it as much as The Mandalorian season 1 and 2, and it's definitely like I think it has a lot of problems and it probably misses more than it hits, but there was definitely still parts of it that I liked, and there was parts of it that I think it did cool things for like the universe and to expand the universe or show us like things we've been wanting for a while. And like I think that was the parts of it that it really like exceeded at, but then there's all these other elements I think it just totally tries to do and fumbles on, like it trying to do some of the stuff with Boba Fett where they're like, let's make him a deeper character. And it's like, I don't mind it in concept. I just think they fumble the ball on that a lot. And I just think they also, when they try to do the split timelines, I don't think that works. But I also like, at this point with seeing this in like multiple different mediums recently, I'm like, man, trying to do timelines like does not easily work. And people really need to stop trying to like swing for that fence because like you're always going to come up short. Like, because I think if this was just like one or two episodes in the past, like if it was all linear, like the first episode's like all Tuscan, second episode is more of that, and then it's like more modern day and more of that. And even The Mandalorian was my favorite parts of this, but even like maybe less of that and more Boba Fett and more time with like the Pikes. And like I think it's just interesting where like when it really started to heat up and get interesting for like the modern day storyline, they were like, all right, now we're gonna go jump over and see what Din is up to. And it just is like a weird, there's just a lot of weird decisions and things that I think they kind of fumbled on, especially because if anything, they're just juggling a lot when really they should have just focused on Boba Fett.
Yeah, I know you guys covered it when you did that Nerdy Site show this week. You covered that kind of idea specifically when you were talking about Vanguard, Call of Duty Vanguard, of like the split timelines and like it for you in particular, it misses more than it hits. And I think for me, that was one of the things that Logan and I talked about in that first episode was like I think it can be done well. I think too often though, when it isn't, it drives pacing to a halt. And I think that was the issue that especially the first few episodes of this series really suffered from was, okay, we're spending 10 minutes of this first episode in kind of the current timeline, and Boba Fett is taking over Jabba's palace and he's got people coming to them and they're not respecting him. And then we spend like 25 minutes of that first episode in like flashback and seeing him come out of the pit and stuff. And it's just like, okay, so the current day stuff just screeches to a halt and we don't even come back to it. And then it was basically the same kind of thing the next couple episodes where it was, okay, like having to split our focus between those things, whereas it could have been either do it in smaller chunks, or like maybe it would have just been better to like kick the series off with Boba reaching out of the Sarlacc, and eventually we'll catch up to where he is at the end of Mandalorian season 2, and then we go into the modern day stuff. But then even beyond that, like once all that timeline stuff kind of stops, they do be like, hey, let's also, I described it as the Fantastic Beast effect of like, we're going to tell a story of Boba Fett. And then as we're like starting to write that and storyboard it out, maybe we got sidetracked and we're like, you know what, actually we want to see what Mando's doing. A la, Fantastic Beast. Oh, let's tell the story of Newt Scamander. And then by now 3 movies in, it's like, Newt Scamander's a side character in the story of Grindelwald versus Dumbledore in those movies. And it's just like, okay, well, that's weird and whatever. And so what
was the point of the first movie then, guys? Like, come on.
This being pitched as a Book of Boba Fett series, and then like almost universally episode 5 with no Boba Fett, like, and is just an episode of The Mandalorian. Everybody's like, oh yeah, we actually really like that show. It's not great that the best episodes of Book of Boba Fett have like the least Boba Fett in them. But at the same time, it's like, it's a weird, like, how do you, if they wanted to tell like the larger story, that they end up telling in this. It's a weird thing to try and like manage, and how do you sell that, and how do you kind of make that pitch. But yeah. Cameron, any other thoughts to add from you on that front?
Yeah, sorry, I was just putting my son to bed. It's past his bedtime. Ugh.
Yeah, no, I've been watching you do your whole play pantomime action here as I've been talking.
He was hungry. We had dinner.
Sure, yeah.
We had a little bit of leftover chicken nuggets, and he wanted the rest of them.
He is a hungry boy.
He's a hungry boy. He's a growing boy of 52 years old. No, I loved it. I love Book of Boba Fett. Like, all the criticisms are there. That's fine. I kind of realized when the first episode came out, and I was like riding really high on it, and other people were like being much more much more critical on it. I'm like, this is going to be one of those things that I really like all of this, and people are going to be like, well, I had a problem with this, and I had a problem with that, and those are all valid, totally valid, 100%. But for me, I loved it. Could they have been done differently in places, paced differently to be better and more palatable? For sure. Like, totally. I think it's weird because, like, I don't know what people like. Also, there's a note here. I really like Robert Rodriguez's like work.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big fan of his Once Upon a Time in Mexico saga, like that trilogy of films. I'm a fan of like even like his stuff like Spy Kids and other stuff like that.
Spy Kids is great.
Spy Kids is an incredible trilogy of films and does not get enough credit.
I saw the third one in the theater. It was in 3D. It blew us away. We loved it.
He did 3D before 3D was like the big trend, man. Like as an art house director, he's always had like an eye on stuff that's like way ahead of its time and way ahead of its trend. And like, I'm not surprised that like I would not be like, I'm not surprised that a lot of like his storyboard work, like his production work and teaming up with Jon Favreau, like put together like possibly one of the series that gives us one of the most immersed in lived in times to like be in Star Wars. Like this made Tatooine feel more like a real place than Tatooine's ever felt, despite the fact that it's the setting for like a hefty chunk of Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I think we could go without Tatooine for a while. I'm okay with that. We don't need to go back to Tatooine for a long time, I feel. But
we're going to, because Boba Fett is there, Cobb Vanth is there, Peli Motto is there, like
Obi-Wan.
Obi-Wan.
Oh, we're gonna Obi-Wan. We're gonna
go there immediately. Yeah, in the next show.
Yeah.
But I like. They're doing a lot of interesting world building to like give us reasons to keep coming back to Tatooine,
Mm-hmm.
and like ultimately I'm okay with that. And
Yeah.
And I will say, like, to the Robert Rodriguez-ness of this series, there were so many things where I was like, this is so quintessentially like a Robert Rodriguez idea that's being introduced here. And I don't know how well I think it meshes with a lot of things. In particular, elements that I'm thinking of are the mods, and there as you know, somebody like Anthony Carboni's out there talking about space Vespas.
I hate the Vespas. I don't mind the mod kids. Like the idea of like a street punk teens, I think is cool.
Well, like
the idea of like
that
cyberpunk teens that mod themselves, I think is cool. But the Vespas, I straight up hate. Like I wish they had speeders.
Yeah,
like the fact that they don't just have crazy souped up speeders, like it gets
this is why though, is because it's an entire play off of the mod trend.
Yeah.
From the 60s. Like it like.
I mean, I get it. I just don't think it translates well.
It doesn't.
The dusty, Tatooine world. But then, especially in like the finale episode there, where we get like a whole kaiju fight between the Rancor and the giant battle droids, and obviously the like King Kong kind of reference with the Rancor climbing for no reason other than to do a King Kong reference, climbing like this little central pillar in the town. Like those elements,
if you go based off the timeline, King Kong ripped this off because this happened first.
Yes, true. Yes, this is a long time ago in a galaxy far, far
That's
away.
Something Robert Rodriguez would say, Frank. That's the thing.
Yeah,
this is so quintessential Robert Rodriguez. Just like.
It was like those aspects for like just they don't work for me because I can feel the director like winking at us, or I can feel the director saying like, look at this thing I'm doing and what it's in reference to. And I just like, I think those could have been handled just with a more deft hand and more subtlety, and I don't think they are here. And I think that's why like some of my favorite episodes were like 5 and 6, where it is kind of moving more back into the like Mandalorian territory of more like Favreau and Filoni kind of as opposed to like Favreau and Robert Rodriguez.
Listen, man, Favreau, Rodriguez, and Filoni all got to play with their Star Wars figurines at real scale, and we were along for the ride. And know what, man, I was all there for it. Like, I love it. I love that aspect of it. I think the flashbacks definitely could have been done better, but I also really like the flashbacks. I liked it. Like,
I loved a lot of the Tusken stuff.
The Tusken stuff was great. I loved it,
and it
when they give him the lizard that goes up his nose, and he has to like vision dream himself to a tree, and he gets the wood for his
stick, yeah.
Gets the gaffy for like he goes to the gaffy tree, gets the gaffy stick, and comes back, and then he goes like, it guided you, and he goes, I thought that was part of the dream. After it like crawls out of his nose to go back into his little thing, and it's like, that's awesome. I love that. That's fantastic. Once again, like really giving more depth to the Tusken Raiders being like I love it when he tells the Pikes that they're like, but we already pay protection. Like this is this is their ancestral claim to the Dune Sea. Like, you will respect it, you will honor it, and it's like, I love all that. Like, I love all of that, man. It's so good.
I absolutely loved it until they just like had them all die off screen. Like, until they fridged them all, and Boba Fett just comes back and they're all gone.
Dude, but when he pulls out the kid's gaffy like training stick,
yeah, I mean,
and like looks at it, and then throws on the pile, dude. I'm like, that broke my heart. I'm like, because like, did anybody survive?
Sad, yeah, no, incredibly manipulatively sad. And there was basically like the one battle hardened like warrior that kind of like taught him how to fight and stuff, because like there were effectively like 3 like Tuskens that we like could identify. There was the kid, there was like the elder or the chief or whatever, and then the warrior one that taught him to fight. And we get the kid's staff as like, okay, yep, the kid's dead. We see the elder's kind of body, but we don't see the one that like
we do.
Was the baddest. I didn't remember seeing him in the bodies.
Yeah. Well, it's her. It's she is the body that is seen. The chief's body is the one that he throws on top of the pyre. Like when it cuts to the next scene and it shows him throwing the body on top of the pyre, it's the chief's, because he pulls up the chief's gaffy stick and looks at it and thinks about keeping it, but then decides to put it on the pyre. And then he kneels down to start the fire, and then he pulls out from his like little side pocket the kid's gaffy stick and then throws it on. So like we saw like the entire tribe is gone.
Well, I mean, in what you just described, you did not describe the warrior woman.
Yeah,
I guess you're
when he comes up to the camp and he's walking through it, it focuses on like from the shoulder up. Like you see her you see her braids.
Okay, I missed that then.
In that scene. It's here's the thing. It's like you could totally miss it. But it's focused on. Like I remember seeing it because I was like, oh, she's dead. And then from there, it's just like, okay, well, who survived? And then it's like, oh, nobody survived. Okay. Because we literally go down the warrior.
I mean, because I missed that, I was like waiting for that one to come back, like throughout the rest of the journey or something like that. And obviously it never happened. So that's, I think they weren't distinct enough for that to visually, easily or
well, also that was like,
that's fine.
No. It's also, how many weeks ago was that for you?
I mean, yeah, like 5. Oh, so yeah, 5. You watched it yesterday. Right?
I watched it all last night. Like it's all so fresh in my mind. Like the entire series is super fresh in my mind.
Yeah.
So I'm obviously going to come out here and be like, oh no, because like I saw it last night. You saw it 5 weeks ago.
Yeah.
We are not like, it is not the same.
But yeah, so like the way it ended made me mad that we had spent so much time with it comparatively for the story. Like if it had a stronger ending, I would like, because again, I was enjoying it in the moment, and then it just like ends so abruptly, and like even to the effect of like Boba comes out of the Bacta tank and somebody says you're healed, to signify, okay, you're not going to go back into those flashbacks anymore. I was like, well, then like that's how that story ends. That's not a great ending to that story. Like, it's not
this
a
is where I think
fulfilling,
that
it's
could have
not a
been done.
satisfying story, satisfying ending to that story. So I was like annoyed by that. And then like I mean, because honestly, I think his aspect of things in like the modern day stuff is the weakest storyline of the series.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
For me in particular, because of this moment, I think that this would have been better if they had saved that part of the flashback for, because they're introducing the Pikes and all of that. I think that the Pike negotiation, him coming back, would have, especially him coming back to the, like maybe like keep the Pike negotiation part in where it's at, and then right in this last episode started off with him like coming back to the destruction of everything and burning the stick, and then have it immediately cut to the present day of him in the blown out sanctuary. I think that would have been a much better, like, just thinking about that, I think that would have been a better transition, like destruction of one place of safety and sanctuary to like the blown out version of another.
Yeah.
And then we find out like in the next scene, oh, the Pikes are responsible for both.
Yeah.
I think would have been super cool. But also, can we just take a moment to say, like, we got Cad Bane in fucking live action?
Yeah.
And he looked rad as fuck.
Yeah, when the titular, like a stranger comes from the desert or whatever.
Oh my gosh.
The first like shot of him, I was like, oh god, they're actually doing, like when he's like super miragey and stuff like that, like too far away to actually know that it's Cad Bane. I was like, oh god, they're actually doing it. Especially as somebody who's been like watching the kind of funny kind of reactions every week and knowing like Barrett's love and hope that we were going to get that character, I'm immediately thinking like, oh god, Barrett's getting his wish.
Dude, the moment you see his man with no name, like
and it's like
no name hat,
the second
like,
shot of him when he's closer, it's like, yep, that's definitely him. And then they have one or two more that is like, if you don't know, to give you a little bit, like they do a thing where it's basically like, here's like 4 shots of him coming, and like depending on how big of a Star Wars nerd you are is when you're going to identify who that character is. And so yeah, it was like the first time around I was like, oh, this is really cool. And then like the second is what solidified it and was like, yep, that's definitely his hat. And
he's
so, yeah,
so cool.
Really cool to see him like brought into to the live action, to especially given his history in the because his like another trivia thing obviously is like there was originally a showdown between Boba Fett and Cad Bane in the Clone Wars that ended up being scrapped back when like Clone Wars season 7 got canceled, and then when they ended up bringing it back, they just had other stories they wanted to tell, but they did like iconically show a like a shootout between Boba Fett and Cad Bane that gave Cad Bane like the metal plate that he has in this. So like theoretically it's still canon.
It happened.
Like it
well,
happened.
They even mention it.
And,
he says it's not going to go that way this time around.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my gosh, it's so good.
And Cad Bane gave the Mandalorian or the Boba the dent in his helmet in that shootout. So yeah, it's bringing that whole thing full circle too, that had previously been shown off at like Star Wars Celebration as like a deleted scene.
What could have been, yeah. And the fact that it's here, it's canon, and like honestly, like, I want to put. So, should we put a pin in this and move into like the things that we actually loved, or are we just already in it?
I mean, yeah, it's like especially for like a lot of these modern things, it's like there isn't really a how did it hold up because we're talking about this thing that exists in the moment. So it's just kind of a blurred thing. I mean, Frank, if you have anything you want to chime in on before we dive into like specifically favorite moments, but yeah, it's a very like blurred kind of segments.
Yeah, because before we move into like other favorite moments, I did want to, while we were still on Cad Bane, I did want to throw out there like, I do think he's super cool, but as somebody who like I haven't watched the Clone Wars, so like I didn't have this attachment to Cad Bane, and I barely knew who this character was. And to go into your thing, like Barrett talking about, are we going to get Cad Bane, is like the only reason that when he shows up, like when you get that second shot, I was like, oh, this is Cad Bane, and it's like, and it's his introduction is like this super cool space western thing with like the marshal, and I think that's awesome. But I feel like they could have just done a lot more to like build him up as a person in the actual narrative of Book of Boba Fett, because he literally just kind of shows up and then dies. And that's another one for me where it's like, as somebody who like doesn't know the character, and I know there's other people who must be like me who haven't seen the Clone Wars. We've just seen all the movies and like everything that's live action, and then you come in and there's already other characters like Ahsoka who just kind of do the same thing where they just show up. But I wish they had done more to be actually like build him up in their history and their relationship, and like how what of a badass that like he is. Because like
well, they show you right away. They show you how much of a badass he is because he outright takes out Cobb Vanth and then also just eviscerates his
mercilessly
deputy.
Destroys his deputy. Yeah.
Yeah. And like that to you right away, you already know if you watched The Mandalorian season 2, you know Cobb Vanth is a badass.
Yeah.
And when he looks at Cobb Vanth and he says, "You never should have given up your armor," you're like, who is this guy? If you don't know who he is, you're immediately going to be like, whoa, who is this guy? He knows about the armor. He knows like what's going on. Who is this guy? And you immediately know, oh, this guy's scary. And then he murders people. And then you're like, whoa. And then when he shows up in the next episode against Boba Fett, and Boba Fett goes, Cobb Vanth. And he goes, Boba Fett. And like they have that standoff in the street. And he like,
you mean Cad Bane, but yes.
Yeah, Cad Bane, sorry. Yeah, Cad Bane. Like, oh, Cobb
yeah. I will
Cad Bane, yeah. No, I love it. Like, I love it.
I will say even if you hadn't seen like last season of The Mandalorian where Cobb Vanth gets introduced, they reintroduce Cobb Vanth in the beginning of that episode and show you what a badass Cobb Vanth is by taking out 3 of the Pikes and not breaking a sweat. And so it is kind of like okay, we've already established he's a cool character, and by the end of the episode you get if anything, more than like pulling from Star Wars Clone Wars, it is the archetypal, like lawman and the man with no name Western kind of character coming in and taking out the lawman. And so like immediately, even there, if you don't know that, like it's very much if you know this character, it's cool to get to see him like actualized. If you don't know this character, he's still immediately introduced as a threat. And
oh, dude,
they do a little bit, I guess, in the finale to like establish that there is a history between them, in the same way that they establish that there's a history between Boba Fett and Black Chrysanthemum. But I will agree, and I know like the Kind of Funny team said this as well in their kind of recap. Like, we give it more of a pass with Black Chrysanthemum because he got introduced earlier in the series. So if we had been introduced to Cad Bane earlier in the series in some of the Pike story or in a flashback or something like that, it wouldn't like. I think it's a tough thing because they wanted that to be a big moment when he comes in at the end of episode 6, that they didn't want to tip their hand for it, but it's a tough thing to try and do. And it very much is one of those things of like, I will say it's interesting to get your perspective on this, Frank, as somebody who doesn't know these characters, because it's the kind of thing I think of. Like, I just replayed through the a lot of the Uncharted 4 and Lost Legacy, and Uncharted 4 I think works as a standalone adventure, but you get so much more out of it if you know the other adventures that those characters have had and you know the history and those kinds of things. And I think it's the same kind of thing here of like, I think that episode and the introduction of that character works as a standalone, but you get so much more out of it if you know their history, if you know the Clone Wars, if you know, even the last time we saw Cad Bane in anything was in the Bad Batch, where he directly was facing off against Fennec Shand. So like there's bad blood between all of those characters, really. We don't get to really see that paid off here, unfortunately. I think that was a missed opportunity. But yeah, like even in the like most recent animated stuff, Cad Bane is kind of like still reintroduced and reinserted into some of these characters that are here in Book of Boba Fett. So yeah, it's definitely interesting.
I just wish there was like more of him and then more of some of those explanations, especially because we spent so long in the flashbacks. Like a flashback with Boba and Cad Bane would have been great. And then to Cam's thing earlier of even kind of like, if we are just shifting everything around, like it would have been great if he gets introduced and then, oh, it's Boba having a flashback about him and Cad Bane from like however long, even if it's like prequel era.
I mean,
like that would have been, I think, cool. And I get it's like, oh, if you've seen the Clone Wars, if you have a lot of this exposition, you already have that. But that's why I was like, you could have just put in like one scene, and even if you didn't do a flashback again, they could have just put in more of Cad Bane, like, because to me, it's like he's cool, he's tough, and like again, like the showdown with the Marshal's cool, and even some of the showdown in the episode, the finale when he shows up is cool. I don't have a problem with him. It's just he's there for like 3 scenes,
yeah,
and that's when I'm just like, oh, I wish if he's this amazing character that got pulled up from the cartoon into like the live action, and then he just gets like murked immediately with like nothing else, and I'm just like, oh, all right, that's kind of disappointing.
Yeah, I will say that especially because one of the things we like in those early flashbacks, there were constantly like little glimpses of like little kid Boba Fett from Attack of the Clones, and like I think logistically they just couldn't pull this off, but like it would have been really cool to have like little kid Boba Fett meeting Cad Bane, because effectively that's when they meet in the timeline of things, and Cad Bane kind of takes a young Boba Fett after the death of Jango Fett under his wing and kind of like introduces him to the bounty life, bounty hunter life. And so yeah, if they like, there's an element of you don't necessarily need to retell that story in live action because it already exists somewhere in animated canon. But like for the people that haven't gone through and know that canon, like I mean, I'll say the other example that I mentioned in the trivia there of like, I'll be curious to see if we see this scene that exists in the comics of Obi-Wan fighting Black Chrysanthemum. I almost won't be surprised if we see that play out in live action, because even fewer people have read the comics compared to like the Clone Wars cartoons and stuff. So yeah, I think if they could have figured out a way to do that, but obviously the kid who played young Boba Fett in Attack of the Clones is now in his 30s or whatever.
Yeah.
So
he is literally 30 years old.
Yeah.
He cannot be a young boy again.
Yeah. I mean, he is as old as Boba Fett should have been now. And that's another thing like Logan and I talked about in the first episode, was the idea that like Temuera Morrison, as great as it is to see him get to like continue to play this character and stuff, he's 20 years older than the character is supposed to be and where we're at in the timeline and stuff. And so that makes like some of the physicality of the role a little bit tougher to manage and deal with. And I think it suffers a little bit, especially like it's almost like I wish he was the one who always stayed in the helmet, because you could get away with so many more things. Versus Pedro Pascal always being the one in the helmet.
Considering how like athletic and like robust and like capable Pedro Pascal is. Yeah, because he's like 20 years younger.
But yeah, so let's dive into other favorite moments. Yeah, obviously it was cool to see Cad Bane. Could have been handled better. I think that's kind of like my thought on a lot of the series overall. Like I really enjoyed it, but as a Boba Fett, as a Book of Boba Fett thing, it doesn't work. As a Star Wars thing, it works and is really cool. And so it's just a weird, like, how could they have managed that better? I don't know.
I think that what they could have done, honestly, is just kept calling it The Mandalorian and called it The Mandalorian Book of Boba Fett. And so when The Mandalorian, when I mean, these other elements outside of Book of Boba Fett show up, that they're from The Mandalorian.
Yeah.
And so it's like, hey, this is kind of like Mandalorian season 2.5.
But even there, like, if you called it The Mandalorian and don't get The Mandalorian for 4 episodes, don't get Grogu for 5 episodes, like, that's why that's going to piss people off who are fans of The Mandalorian or who are fans
But that's
of
why you
Baby
don't
Yoda
call it
Grogu.
that's why you just don't call it The Mandalorian. You say Mandalorian, semicolon, The Book of Boba Fett. So we know it's a spin-off of The Mandalorian, but because he's still, like, it's still part of the greater Mandalorian kind of thing that they're doing.
I mean, I still would argue there that it has too little Mandalorian to be called The Mandalorian.
That's fine, but guess what? People are pissed off either way. I don't like
that's what I'm saying is like it doesn't
make
work.
Anybody happy 100%.
It doesn't work either way, and so they like that for what they have. It was like they set themselves up to fail in a lose-lose kind of situation, unless they had gone with something that other people are throwing out there, like just calling all of this stuff Star Wars stories or something like that, because it's very much doing the thing that like especially with like the onslaught of other projects that are coming that I'm kind of expecting is they're just building, like, this should have just been, it could have been Star Wars Story season 1, season 2, season 3 or whatever, and it's just a matter of it's an anthology series, a la like I think I described this in the Hawkeye episode that we did for D Plus Show of like, if all of the different Marvel shows had just been kind of like different seasons of like a Marvel thing, and you've got WandaVision, you've got Loki, you've got Hawkeye, you've got Falcon and Winter Soldier. That's the other one. Like, you're gonna have crossover among those different shows, among those different characters, like we're having crossover among these different Star Wars things, but it still puts it all in like one umbrella to kind of just set a standard for. And so it's just a weird, like, again, I don't know what the fix for this would have been, but
Yeah.
it's weird either way. Going the Book of Boba Fett route was weird given the amount of non-Boba Fett story that they wanted to tell. And if they'd gone Mandalorian, it would have been weird by the lack of Mandalorian for so much of that story. So it's just a weird thing. But that aside, diving into the like Mandalorian side of things here.
Can I just say real quick? I wanted to give a shout out to Cobb Vanth in his intro in this season, or in the show. When he shows up, he kills those dudes. But my favorite part is he kicks like he tells him, "Leave the chest.
Mhm.
That's your fine for trespass for not reading a map right." And he goes, that box is worth more than your town. And he goes,
maybe I'll retire.
Maybe I'll retire off it. And then he kicks it open, and when he sees it, like, we don't see what's inside of it just yet. And he just like taps with his foot, and it falls back, and we see the spice.
I mean,
and it just like falls all the way. Like, we already knew it was spice. We knew that. Yeah. But like the fact that it does that like thematically, and like it shows like, oh, what kind of a marshal is he? You immediately know, because he kicks over the drugs and lets the drugs blow away in the wind, that he's the white hat. He's the good guy.
Yep.
And then when the black hat comes to town, what does the black hat do? He shoots the marshal and murders the deputy. Like, classic, just classic.
Yeah.
Also, I realized, Frank, you said they killed Cad Bane. Did they? Did they kill Cad Bane? Because his little life support thing was going beep, 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 beep at the end.
I mean, it's definitely, they leave it open and it enough that they could potentially bring him back. But I think if they do, that's gonna feel like a cheat. Because it's nowhere near as blatant as you just said it was, Cameron. It's,
once again, I watched this we all watched it like,
but you don't. There's no beeping. You don't hear anything. It's a light continues to kind of pulse a little bit to hint that maybe for eagle-eyed people, or to give them the out if it happens, that like, oh yeah, he didn't really die. But like, the scene is very much set up that Boba just killed that guy. Like,
Cad Bane has escaped just as bad things before. You can't stop Cad Bane.
That would just be really shitty, though, and probably the ultimate way to kind of go with the theme of this season, where it's like the one moment that Boba Fett got to do something just gets undone, and Cad Bane is just alive to do more wreak havoc still.
Yeah. So I think that should be the end of Cad Bane. If they want to like bring him back in like stuff that exists before this, like Obi-Wan or whatever, like do that, sure, no problem there. But yeah, like if they come back in a Mandalorian season 3 or something, and Cad Bane shows up with like another thing on his chest or something to that he avoided death, especially because like we see at the end, oh, Cobb Vanth has somehow avoided that death and is going to be turned into a mod and kind of get the Fennec Shand treatment. It would be a cop-out for Cad Bane to do it as well, because who would have put Cad Bane in a Bacta tank, and who would have got him there? Like, he didn't have people in the way that like Cobb Vanth had people looking out for him, kind of thing. So
that's true.
Yeah, like I know what you're saying, and I saw, the same kind of thing brought up in like everything you might have missed in Mandalorian episode 7 kind of videos and breakdowns and stuff. But I think it would be a cop out to say that Boba didn't kill Cad Bane in that moment.
I'd be cool with it. That's all I'm saying.
I
I'd
mean,
be cool with it.
like, I would be as annoyed with that as I think Logan is with the fact that Boba Fett survives the Sarlacc pit in the first place. Because that's something obviously
we know
Logan
how
has
he
many,
survived. Oh yeah,
as many times harped about of like, hey, maybe this doesn't need to actually be a thing. Maybe he could have just died in that Sarlacc pit.
but guess what? Like, hey, if that's how the season starts and it ends with the same kind of thing, there you go, thematic. It works.
It's like poetry. It rhymes.
I was
good
more
George Lucas
that...
impression, by the way. Good
Thank
George
you.
Lucas impression.
Thank you.
I was more bummed that there wasn't a moment with Din where he talks to Luke Skywalker though, and he's like, "Yeah, I got to go help out Boba Fett," and then Luke's like, "What?
Wait,
like,
what?
Who's alive?" Like that's the missed opportunity there.
Yeah, that's the missed opportunity. Luke doesn't know that Boba Fett's alive.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of little fun things. I mean, like I will say I love the like a Luke and Ahsoka getting to share a moment, given obviously, Ahsoka knows Anakin Skywalker way more than Luke ever would. And could like, just because we get that scene, it's like, okay, cool. I can in my headcanon say that they've had many conversations about what Anakin was like back in the day and stuff like that. And
yeah.
and they can have kind of like a shared history about them. And it like, so it's almost sad that like they even like seemingly put a button on that relationship with like Luke saying to her, like, will I ever see you again or whatever. It's like, maybe he'll like, maybe she'll turn back up in the Ahsoka series. But like, and it's obviously like, it probably costs a bunch of money to keep de-aging Luke like that, and especially like to make it look as good as it did in this one, compared to the end of Mandalorian 2. Like, it was definitely like, as I guess as soon as like the episode 5 ended and Mandalorian was like, I gotta go see a little friend, I was like, oh, are they actually gonna like bring Luke back again in this era? Okay, yeah, they probably will, but it'll probably be like a short little scene or something like that. And so for as much time as we got with him, I was like, oh wow, they definitely put like the money and resources into that episode.
I loved it.
I thought it worked.
Man. It worked out super great. I think it's totally setting up. It's fun to see a young, still inspired, still idealistic Luke about the idea of the future of the Jedi. I think that like I've saw a lot of people harp on, and be like, Luke, like the choice that Luke gives Grogu is, they're like, oh, that's like this or that, and there's a lot of complaints about it. But I also felt that it wasn't Luke being like this is the life of the Jedi. He was showing Grogu what the two choices in front of him for the rest of Grogu's life was going to be. Like, do you want to continue down this path with the Mandalorian, or do you want to dedicate yourself to being a Jedi? And like, you can't half-ass two things. You got to whole-ass one thing.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's effectively like what Yoda tells him in Empire Strikes Back. It's effectively that choice, but with props this time around. Like you can take this chainmail and go help your friend, or you can take this lightsaber and not and stay here with me. So yeah, it's very much like Luke as a teacher isn't going to be the best teacher given who his teachers were.
That's accurate,
because he's still like it's still harping to the old ways that led to the downfall of the Jedi, really. And so I appreciate that in that thematic sense of foreshadowing what will eventually lead to.
Well, I don't necessarily think of it as like that is a foreshadowing. It's just it's
a step in that journey of like he couldn't even train Grogu as a first student because he couldn't break him from those attachments or whatever. And so like
that's what I'm saying.
Trying to do that with like more students down the line might not work.
For me, I didn't think of it so much as because I think the thing that separates this from like what will end up being Luke's other students down the line is when he's talking about Grogu, he talks, and it's funny too because Grogu's like 50 plus years old, and they make mention about how hard, like in episode 1, they make mention of how difficult it is to train somebody who's older, and Luke talks about like it's like he's like it's like his heart's not always in it, and it like is it about the attachments? Sure, but I think it's also a matter of Luke like because here's the thing: Grogu was given to Luke to keep Grogu safe, and like that is like you have to go with him so you can learn what you're doing so that you don't like that's the situation we're in at the end of Mandalorian season 2. That's not necessarily the case when we get into Book of Boba Fett, and so
yeah, I don't know if I agree that it was. Yeah. I'm giving you to Luke to keep you safe. It was, I mean, so much of the Mandalorian season 2 arc was I'm returning you to your people.
Yeah,
and the Jedi are his people. But like I think a lot of the theme of the couple episodes we get here is actually the Mandalorians were his people because of that connection to Din over the course of those couple seasons.
He's a foundling. Yeah. Like that's the whole thing is like and I like the idea like they set up things perfectly and I really love the way they do with things there, but I also felt it was like this is not necessarily like a thing set in stone Luke's going to do with every student.
Yeah.
Or like what the situation is going to be. I think this was specifically he knew that Grogu needed to make a choice and not just be handed off to like Grogu had to make Grogu's choice for Grogu's future.
Yeah.
And he does. And that's why he's with me now. That's why he's my son. I'm joking.
What did
no, but yeah, sorry, we went off this tangent but I wanted to bring up the N1 ship.
That's why I was actually just gonna segue into like what did people think of the Naboo starfighter being retrofitted?
Hated it at first because I really love the Razor Crest. I love the idea of a bounty hunter ship also having some like living quarters. I love the idea of like the gunship of the Razor Crest being a like home for Din and just like being like that kind of like home type situation. Little like a little bit like the Millennium Falcon, but not not a I want to say I'm thinking speedster, but the word I'm looking for isn't that. It's whatever like not smuggler, whatever carrier type thing that is. But like the Razor Crest was like distinctly a gunship and it was also his home and it was also like this thing on wheels for him. And so I was like, I don't like the idea of him just getting a starfighter. And then they won me over completely during the retrofitting. When they pull out the thing and they basically make this thing first off, massive shout out to honoring George Lucas's original film. Just like by going the hot rod route with this starfighter, paying homage to American Graffiti with like how they make this thing look like a fucking hot rod. And it's so cool. And like, there's nothing cooler than, 1 second, flick over, push the button, boom, getting away from the cops. Like the coolest, just the coolest thing. It's chromed. Like it's like, it's silvered out just like his armor. And it's just perfect. Like, it has a little pod in the back for Grogu, and it's just absolutely perfect. I love it. It's hands down like probably my favorite starfighter now in all of Star Wars. I love it. It's so good.
It is definitely a Lego set I am going to want eventually. Yeah, I thought it was really like when it got introduced, I was like, I like it. I like the design of it. I think it is wildly impractical for Din's line of work because we saw him use the Razor Crest in practice of bringing bounties in and stuff like that. And how are you going to necessarily do that without another seat or something like that on the starfighter? But I did appreciate the honoring the history of it, and it's pre-Empire, so you don't need these tags or whatever. It's a good ship for those aspects of the job. It can go to light speed without needing the ring or whatever, like a lot of the ships we saw of that era. And it makes sense that there was a history with Naboo and Tatooine, so you'd find that ship and you'd find those junk pieces in there. I liked that there are little hints of the yellow that gonna get left on it to pay homage to that. And also, it was fun just to see them going through Beggars Canyon. canyon and stuff. Oh yeah,
Oh yeah,
the Jawa sandcrawler with the giant crate dragon skull on it. That was dope as
that, but
hell.
also like the Jawa that shows up, who's like one of her like junk dealers, comes in, and there's like a tall, skinny one and like a short, fat one, and I'm like, they gave so much personality just to these two Jawas, just in the way they look. Also,
it's
dated
Bulk Skull.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Bulk and Skull, 100%. And it's like, where did you guys get this? Oh, they pulled it off of a bike speeder.
Yeah.
Like,
brave.
love it.
Shout out to Pelimato having a BD1 droid.
That's the one thing I want to give a shout out to.
In Jedi Fallen Order.
So good.
When it came on, I was literally like, BD1. I was like, it literally blew me away to see it in live action, where it's like, it's always been canon because Fallen Order's canon, but I was like, oh my god, it's real. Like it's there. Like, I love the design of BD1 because like if I was in that world, that's the kind of droid you'd want to have that's like small and can go around, but it's still usable, where it does like the hologram of when they're building the ship. Where I was like, that would be such a useful little droid to just have like walking around. It's almost like an Amazon Echo with legs.
Yeah.
And it can do like holograms and stuff.
It had a little trouble lining up the light for Din, but eventually got there.
Yeah. Max Rebo seemingly not at work at the sanctuary on the day it exploded. So seemingly he lives. He lives to play another day. Maybe we'll get a Max Rebo Sice Noodles reunion sometime in the future in Star Wars being Star Wars and dumb.
Going back to the ship real quick, I did really like the ship because like one of the things I gave a shout out to when we did our episode 1 D plus show was that I did like the ship's designs and some of the weird kind of sleek designs they have there. And that's what I think it's so cool to see that in like the more modern Star Wars context and see it like retrofitted, and like Cam said, it's totally just like a hot rod with like the engine block. Like they just cut the top open and the engine's just sticking out, and then they like dive a little bit more into like how the spaceships and how they work and like what makes them tick, and even if they're just kind of throwing around terms and stuff, and but it's still like was a fun little thing. And then I think you kind of already mentioned it a bit too, but when they go through Beggar's Canyon, I'm like, oh man, like there's so much random love for like episode 1 and like the good parts. So I was like the good parts of episode 1. So that's why I like that. Like that hit for me. And I feel like it's almost easy to just be like, here, fan service. Like, let's just talk about things from the past. Like let's just talk about it. But I think a lot of that hit for me. And I'm excited to see that as his new ship going forward, because I think kind of like what happened a little bit with Boba Fett in this season, I think he's kind of done with bounty hunting, and I think he's going to move on to like greater things. I don't know what exactly, but I think that's kind of another symbol of that is like he just needs him and Grogu. He doesn't need the compartment for more people.
I mean,
we kind of pick up on what his next goal is because he gets told what he has to do to atone.
Yeah, I was going to say like they're setting up the like that he or maybe Grogu will be the ones to like bring and restore Mandalore to, their greater glory or something like that. Obviously he still has the Darksaber. That was really cool to see him like using the Darksaber in that in his like reintroduction, because like there was a moment where I had forgotten that it ended with him, and so when he pulls it out and starts just messing up those Clatuinians or whatever, and then like screws up his own leg, I was like, yeah, because he doesn't know how to use this thing. Of course he's gonna screw up and do that. It's a good thing he did what we all did playing with lightsabers growing up, of like, oh, we all would have messed up our legs.
What I really love it because there's like a specific way that you have to use the Darksaber that is probably like intuitive to somebody who has used a lightsaber. But for Din, who has like never done that, like it's like he doesn't get how it works. And I love that. Like I love that it takes time to train on this thing. And of course, oh my gosh, the armorer.
Yeah.
When she is just like wrecking his shit with her blacksmithing tools, it's like, fuck yeah.
There is an interesting element of it because like I think they introduced this like new lore about the Darksaber of like it's heavy and it has like a weight to it, which lightsabers historically don't, and like aren't heavy items, and heavy like it's a beam of light, it's a laser light, it's a laser sword, like, so the idea that the Darksaber has some kind of like power that like you have to overcome to wield this thing is absolutely like I think an interesting element, and something I think that will be interesting to see how how that plays out in episode 3 or in season 3 of the Mandalorian. And yeah, just I like seeing the devastation and destruction of Mandalore.
Oh, geez, yeah.
Kind of in that flashback of like just like the Empire basically just nuking the crap out of the world there. It'll be
you see
interesting
like
to see
the silhouettes of all the Mandalorian helmets.
Yeah, because it's interesting to think that I guess like the flashbacks we had to Din in like the first season were technically probably like the first real live action shots we saw of Mandalore, but even that I think it's been basically that was Mandalore's moon or whatever.
Oh no, specifically that was not him in that was not him on Mandalore because he was not born a Mandalorian. He's a foundling. That's the people who saved him in his village, who brought him in as a foundling. Like, so back to season 1 of The Mandalorian, his parents put him in a hiding spot, and the droids that are attacking aren't the droids of the Empire, they're separatist droids.
Oh yeah, you're right. Yep.
Yeah, because Din is old enough that he was a child during the Clone Wars, and the people who saved him and then adopted him and like rescued him were the Mandalorians. Granted, this is during the height of the Clone Wars when Mandalore is all united, but then you also have like these offshoots, the cult aspect of his sect basically being like, after the leadership, whatever happens with the tumultuous like state of the leadership,
that was like what I was getting confused on is they survived because they were on the moon. Yes. Like the armor and Paz Vizsla.
Because they were in exile because they were not part of the main government.
But yeah, so it'll be interesting to see kind of the Mandalorian season 3, retaking or trying to retake or returning to and so, in some way taking place on Mandalore to try and restore his path in the way. And so ultimately I'm going to be curious if like he does that or if he decides that this is not the way or something like this. It'd be interesting to see where they get with it.
But I think that he should do it because obviously we are leading up to the great revelation that the Mandalorians were restored by none other than Grogu the Great, wielder of the Darksaber, head of the Mudhorn clan. Obviously, like that's what's being set up here.
Clearly,
I don't know what else to tell you.
Yeah,
I'm waiting for Grogu to get his little helmet with like the ears.
Yes.
And then like they're gonna sell so many toys.
His chainmail shirt.
They're already going to sell a whole new batch of toys because now he's got chainmail that you need to throw on him.
Dude, the spear getting melted down was like, Beskar's not meant to isn't meant to be a weapon. It's meant to be armor. Mm-hmm. And like, that's cool. I love that right away.
It is, except the first time he melted something down to it, it was to put like to get those little missiles for his arm cannon thing. So it's like, all right, you kind of fudged the rules a little bit on that one.
That's part of the armor, though. That's part of the gauntlet armor.
Sure,
it's built in. It's part of the package.
Sure,
it was an upgrade in the
clearly
skill tree.
used for offensive capabilities.
Well, so is the jetpack and the flamethrower, but those are still good.
That's what I'm saying. Is like it's cool, and the idea of like, here's why we're going to not give you this Beskar spear to fight with moving forward
because it's been weird the entire time.
But it's also like you're just kind of retconning a little bit there, and doesn't quite work with everything else that has been set up before. But whatever. It's absolutely worth it to give Grogu that little cute chainmail.
Also, shout out to Bryce Dallas Howard being the one that directed that episode, and people complaining about her ignoring the mask, like the helmet off rule in her season 1 episode where he takes, like, he's alone when he takes off his helmet.
Mm-hmm.
But like, people are like, but people could still probably see him or whatever. And she's like, fine, you want it? Here you go. There you go. There's the, like, good for her, girl. Yeah. Like, you go, girl.
He took it off and paid the price for it.
Yep. Oh my gosh, dude. But that duel against Pat was so good. When he's like, that Darksaber was like made by my clan and now it returns to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then he pulls out a vibro dagger and a shield.
Yep.
And I'm just like, yes, finally we're getting more vibro weapons in Star Wars because vibro weapons are the shit.
Mm-hmm.
They're so cool. Like, they're so cool and they're so good. And we're finally getting that again.
Yeah.
And then he like takes out the one from his boot. to win the fight. Like, so good.
Yeah. It was very fascinating watching this season, having seen Dune so recently. There were a lot of unexpected parallels to Dune that between the spice and obviously the desert planet,
the vibrating things,
the vibrating things, the shield that even the lightsaber can't get through, but like if he had gone through it slowly, he could have kind of like
even the water.
Yeah,
the shakedown that the dude has on the water, like it's just Dune.
Yep,
it's just Dune.
Yep.
Even Mandalore getting blown up is also kind of Dune-esque.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, lots of Dune flavors there.
I loved it, man.
But yeah, any other highlights or anything anybody else wants to celebrate?
I know we brought it up, but I do want to give like a very special shout out to the mods. It's just like, even though like, did I like their scooters? No, I thought they were like way too bright and shiny for Tatooine. I think if they had been like sanded up, like, because like sandstorms come through Tatooine all the time, like those things should be sandblasted like everything else. I
don't necessarily like the execution of it, but given the things that it is paying homage to,
yes,
it is very clear like those are the one things these kids care about, and like
that's true.
And so that is what they put their money and their resources into. It's that and their mods, and everything else like they don't care about. Like they're fine putting all of their like ill-gotten gains. They're stealing water, but they're putting money into their space Vespas.
Right, that's so mod. No, I love the like idea of these like posh Coruscanti like accent, like fake Coruscanti accented kids with their like just totally doing the mod trend aspect. And it's like, first off, shout out to the first thing that ever introduced me to like mod culture, Punk SLC Punk, sorry, which is a movie where like one of the, there's a couple of characters who are just like straight up in the 90s doing like mod fashion, and it's just like, it was my first introduction to that and like that entire subculture. So shout out to that film for introducing it to me, and also just like being like mod. There's not enough stuff in pop culture right now that has like that mod aspect to it. And I think right now that's kind of a missed opportunity for a lot of trends right now. It's the mod trend. Like that could definitely make a comeback real hard.
And shout out to Thundercat, who was the mod doctor. And he showed up twice. When he showed up the first time, I was like, is that Thundercat? What the fuck? And then he showed up again, and I was like, okay, I guess he might just keep coming back as like a weird side character on Tatooine. Which I'm not against it. It's just that was definitely weird for me as a fan of his from way before this.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. When Boba Fett throws the coins, he goes, the credits, and he goes, she's dying. And he's like, well, why did you say so? It's like, was it about the money? Was it about that she's dying? Both? Like, there you go. It's like it's 100% like fulfilling this like kind of like dark underworld underbelly of the galaxy that Tatooine is, and like this works so well.
Mm-hmm.
Also his massive clamps that you're like, how's he gonna do surgery with that? He doesn't. He takes off the clamp and puts on like this like surgical tool, multi-tool, and it was just so rad.
It was so definitely rad. It was definitely weird getting a flavor of Cyberpunk 2077 on Tatooine, where he's basically a Ripper doctor.
Dude, when he's like, aren't you going to sew her up? Or aren't you going to stitch her back up? He goes, what? And cover all that beautiful metalwork?
Yeah.
And it's like, dude, I love this.
Yeah.
Like, I love it.
Yeah, very much like I will say I thought the like Cobb Vanth like mid-credit scene as like the tease or whatever was a weird choice.
Because he only got shot in the shoulder. Like,
I mean, yeah, like that's the thing. Like, he got shot in the shoulder, so when it was such a like, oh, he's probably fine, like at the end of the last episode, and then when like the penultimate episode, and then so when the final episode comes out and they're like, they killed the sheriff in cold blood, it's like, oh, did they did kill him? Okay, well, that's weird. That it's weird that we didn't see that, or we saw so much like care given to him thinking he was going to survive.
Well, the other guy clearly wasn't going to survive.
Right, yeah, no, obviously the other guy was straight up dead. But so like they had set up the scene to let us, the audience, be pretty sure that he'd survived and that he'd just
he's
got
out of
clipped.
commission, but yeah.
It was the kind of thing, like, I was fully expecting him to not be there in the final battle, but he would have, like, been able to come to and rally the troops or whatever. And so when he's just absent entirely, it's like, oh wow, okay, I guess they killed him off. I don't know enough about the aftermath stuff to know, like, where in the timeline, if he has met his fate and any of that stuff. So when they come back to him and just have him in the back to tank it, and then the Thunder Cat there too, like, add the new tech to him or whatever. It's like, oh, okay, that's how they're gonna bring him back. Cool. It doesn't have nearly the same impact that Boba killing Bib Fortuna did at the end of Mandalorian season 2. But I guess, it's he'll probably come back in Riders of the New Republic or whatever, or something down the line to kind of do that. And I'll be curious to see what his tech powers are or whatever, and if it is just he gets a metal arm or something, because obviously he only got like clipped in the wing or something.
He could have like what that mod girl has, where she has like she still has like the human skin grafted hand, but then the rest of her arm from like shoulder down is robot. It could be like that.
I mean, as much as I like the look of the mods, I had no idea what any of their stuff actually did for them. So like, that's something that they just didn't really do a great job. Like, this was going back to kind of the Robert Rodriguez-ness of it. Like, it definitely feels like Robert Rodriguez introduces them to set up a, as a backdoor pilot for like, come see the mods of Tatooine or something like that, as like a new Disney Plus show 3 years from now or something like that. And if they end up doing that, cool. I hope they give us a better sense of what they actually do. Because I can't imagine the one that had like the eye thing like that. I guess that gives him the power to 360 no scope somebody, because he very clearly does that in the he has that slow motion spin shot kind of thing.
It's not even that big of a deal, but the fact that Ed Boon of all people, like Ed Boon, like father of Mortal Kombat, was like, I think this was a bit unreal. Like, this was a bit much, you guys. It's like, Ed Boon, if there's a single human being on planet Earth who should not be making this commentary about it, it's you, motherfucker. Like, you with your, like, what's really unnecessary? Taking a moment out of a fight in a video game to show somebody's clavicle breaking.
I mean,
that's unnecessary.
Like, it was such an easy thing to like it is very, like, I hadn't seen the Ed Boon like comment on it or whatever, but like the fact that the internet is like making fun of it could have so easily been fixed if in that shot, in that slow motion shot, you see a blaster bolt go by that he is avoiding by doing the spin. It does, like, we don't see that though. Like, they didn't throw that in. They forgot to put that in post or something like that.
Somebody pointed out that he had been like right where he was standing, like right next to it, there was a blaster bolt that had just hit like the wall next to him. So
I mean, yeah,
but that's some dweeb on Twitter. Like, that's not real.
Yeah, I was gonna say it was not edited in a way that made that made that move look justified. And so
no, it's
the internet is
it's Robert Rodriguez. You don't need that.
Exactly.
Like, Robert Rodriguez. It's Robert. Like, this is what you get with Robert Rodriguez, people. Like, this is like when they announced Robert Rodriguez is doing Book of Boba Fett. I'm like, cool. Everything that we've seen, that's like, it's just kind of impractical. The King Kong motif thing and everything. It's like, yeah. Because who's directing this stuff, you guys? Who's producing it? It's Robert Rodriguez. Like, this is 100% his style, and I love it. Like, but I'm also a Robert Rodriguez fan, so take that as you will.
I didn't love that moment either, and it definitely was something weird that kind of stuck out to me in the episode. But I kind of took it as that guy just being like, "This is my moment."
I mean,
he's like, it's a close up, it's an action shot. I got to do something.
That's and I was like,
real. Man, you're in Star Wars. Have fun, kid. Like, you're doing it. You're living the dream. So spin around.
That guy is a GIF now forever. So shout out to him. Absolutely, yeah. Like,
and also like,
but
I love
just
mods.
Like that. It's just another like. There are so many great ideas about the show that just like some of them are very hit or miss in execution, and I thought that was just another one of them. Like, again, I liked the guy, I like the enthusiasm, but like even on a broader sense, like the and there's another thing that again I've already heard elsewhere in like a kind of funny kind of recap on this, but like they split up the party with like, okay, Boba Fett and Mando are gonna like, the
Mhm.
Mandalorian is gonna distract one of the tanks, and all the other people got the other Scorpion tank kind of thing, and then the Rancor comes in, takes out one of them. And they do everything to set up that, like, oh, against all odds, these guys, the scrappy townspeople and Freetowners are going to like take down the other one. And then no, the Rancor just comes in and takes that one out too. It's like they
Boba Fett rode
could
a
have.
Rancor, you guys. Boba Fett rode a Rancor. I can hear Logan seething wherever he is at just being like just the fact that I've said that out loud and put that into the world. I can hear Logan's skin crawl
Yeah, that's fair.
just in anger at that statement, which also gives me joy.
Yeah, there are definitely a lot of things, and Logan, yeah, Logan basically like Logan forfeit his opportunity to be on the show and vent all of his frustrations about it. He threw in our Slack today like, here are my general thoughts, and I was like, I don't care, Logan, I'm not going to share those because you're not being on the show. But yeah, his overall stuff was basically like, yeah, he doesn't think it worked. He kind of shares my broader sentiment that I shared on Twitter of like the fantastic beastness of it, of like they didn't have a full thing for a Boba Fett story. And I don't necessarily think they didn't have a full thing for a Boba Fett story. I just think they didn't choose to tell a like 7 episodes of a Boba Fett story.
Yeah.
And so it's like it's an interesting thing there. But yeah, it like there are definitely a whole bunch of things where I was like, yeah, Logan hates this and I don't care. Like I had a fun time with it. I've enjoyed enough of the extended canon stuff to enjoy it. Like especially in episode 5, all the Mandalorian stuff was really cool. And then episode 6 was, oh, cool, they brought Cobb Vanth back. Oh, awesome. Oh, cool, like Mando's going to this island. And oh, cool, they brought Luke and Grogu back. Oh, cool, Ahsoka's there too. Like, oh, cool, there's Cad Bane. Like, it was and Cam Hawkins, I think, said this as well, of like people who watched that episode on were like, oh cool, it's that guy. Oh cool, it's that guy. They don't know those characters if they haven't watched a whole bunch of the extended stuff. And I basically compared it to like, yeah, it's pretty much how I felt playing Kingdom Hearts 3. I was like, oh cool, it's that person. I don't know really what that means. Oh cool, it's that person. But I know that this Cameron does. I know Cam Hawkins loved it. I know Alex O'Neill loved it. I know Nabishin loved it. I know Brandon Gann loved it. I know Pixel Brave loved that stuff. And people can just like things. And yeah, I think as a Boba Fett story, this was incredibly lacking. But as a Star Wars thing, I had a great time. It was a lot of fun.
I feel like yeah. I'll go ahead, Frank.
My final thing with it was almost just like this show is a great storyboard and like great concept art, but when you really flesh it out and like kind of pull everything down and put it together, it didn't really come together. And I think there's a lot they could have done differently and a lot better. But it's like when you get those little moments and those cool kind of like picturesque drawings, it's like, yeah, oh, Boba Fett's gonna be on a Rancor on top of a building, and oh, and this is gonna happen, and this is gonna happen, and this is gonna happen. And it's like there's a lot of cool little things, but there's like when you try to really just flesh it out and sew everything together and have like a cohesive story, I think it fumbles on like so much of what they tried to do. And it falls into this like thing that like a lot of modern Star Wars has too, where it's just like things are happening just because it needs to happen and we need to keep moving forward. Or like, you know, it's just like it's not just because like, oh, this is a cohesive story and everything feels like it's happening because that's just natural. It feels like a story that is being told to me, and things like need to happen and play out just so that they can progress. And then that's why like people show up and then just leave and then also just like die, and like it's just all this stuff is just like happening.
There was a pair of Hutts called the Twins that we saw at, like for in 2 episodes here that like showed up, seemed to be threatening, and then just bailed the next episode. they bailed immediately after Black Chrysanthemum failed to kill Boba Fett, and they like showed up and were like, hey, truce, we're actually gonna peace out of this. It's just like, what was the point of that at all? Apart from just being like, hey, the Hutts are still out there just because Jabba's dead, I guess. Like, it's like, I guess even like there are a lot of things of this show, much like now kind of in retrospect, there are a lot of things of The Mandalorian that feel like they're setting up for other things. Like Black Chrysanthemum being introduced sets up for other characters from the Black Chrysanthemum kind of story, and the Dr. Aphra stuff, I think, will start like populating and kind of bridging the gap from comics into the live action verse. Obviously, Cad Bane was kind of another instance of kind of another part of Star Wars coming into live action. Ahsoka, obviously, Cobb Vanth. Like it's introducing these things, and so that, you know, in the same way that like Hawkeye gets introduced in Thor, so that when Hawkeye comes back in Avengers, you can at least be like, oh, it's that guy. So I think there's like a lot of place setting that's happening in these stories now, and if it happens well, we're okay with it, and it fits into a story, and it's a cool, you know, thing. And if it happens poorly, we kind of have a lot of these criticisms about it, like, okay, but really, like, what was the point of him apart from, okay, next time we see that character, you know, we'll be like, oh, okay, cool. Like, they didn't do a great thing here, but, you know, eventually they'll come back in some way or shape or form, maybe. Or at least the door has now been opened for them to come back. And so, like, I guess the last thing I want to like kind of lead the conversation end on is, what do we think is next for Boba Fett / Fennec Shand?
I think he's going to keep being the daimyo, and here's because I think that's kind of what his main goal is, and his main thing is. But I think they're already kind of hinting at that it's not going to go well, because I think he kind of has that like internal conflict of like being a bounty hunting space killer, but then now he's trying to settle down and take care of people. And even at the end of this episode, he's like, this isn't right. Like, I don't feel right here. But I think they're going to kind of like dig in and have him be this like daimyo crime boss for a while. But I assume eventually that's just going to fall apart. Like, I assume that's going to be kind of the story, is like, now this was like his rise to being the like crime boss that's like accepted amongst the city. And I think it's eventually just going to end with him like losing everything that we've kind of seen, and then some of these characters kind of going in their own directions. That's like would be my guess.
I get like one of the elements I think that the show really dropped the ball on is like we talk about him as a crime boss. He didn't do any crime. Like, he's not like what. Like,
well, technically speaking, he's committing extortion. But
I mean, he
can't even protect the places that he's supposed to protect. Like, they literally just get blown up. So it's like he's a terrible crime
they
boss.
got blown up. They got blown up as part of like the declaration of war. Like, that is typical crime boss stuff. Like, oh, there's this big thing that's lucrative for this other family. We're gonna go fuck it up, and then it's going to be like, that's our declaration of war, and that's what that was.
And I'm not disputing why the Pikes blew it up. I'm just saying, as Boba Fett being daimyo crime boss, if you're running extortion on a place, you're supposed to provide protection. And one of the main places he was supposed to protect got blown up. So I'm like, he's not a very good crime boss. Like, he doesn't have the muscle to control his own territory.
That's like saying the Corleones weren't good because Sonny got shot up at a toll booth. Like, it's not fair.
I would argue I would argue it is a fair criticism, because like, at no point other than him occasionally showing up, like, he is not stationed any people there at Sanctuary or whatever to actually provide defense. Like, if he had muscle there at Sanctuary that gets sidelined or sideswiped and blown up, then I would have been like, okay, he was doing that. But like, he just doesn't actually do any crime bossy things throughout this, apart from he shows up and people give him money.
I hate to bring it to you, but that's usually how most protection rackets go. They don't actually have it, the quote unquote protection is protection from them coming and fucking up your shit. Like, that's what the protection. That's why it's a racket. If you're not paying for security fees to these people, you're paying them so they don't come and mess up your place. That's the extortion of it.
So if that's what they want to get across, they need to show Boba Fett doing that, and then somebody being like, okay, here's the protection fee. Like, the fact that they don't do that at all just leaves like Boba Fett. But
they do that because he goes to the mayor's office. He goes to the mayor's office, and that's that entire point of that is like, I'm here to fuck your shit up because you didn't give me tribute. And then all of a sudden he's like, oh yeah, here's credits. And they do that.
They didn't though. Like, I mean, they don't give him credits. The guy flees. The guy bails.
Before he flees, you're thinking about when he shows back up after he finds out that the guys agreed to give the territory over to the Pikes. Prior to that, the second episode, when he shows up with the would-be assassin, Second episode,
yeah.
like at the beginning of the episode, he goes to the mayor's office because the guy's like, it was the mayor. The mayor sent me. Takes him over and says, like, basically extorts the mayor in the mayor's office. Like, that happens.
I still don't think he actually walked away with anything from that, but you obviously did see it like much more recently than I did.
Literally saw it last night.
But it's like, I mean, and that's just another problem with like the pacing / like the way they split the story. Because even you kind of telling that, I'm like, oh yeah, the second episode for me is I'm thinking of the flashback stuff with the Tuskens. I completely forget that there was like 5 minutes of that episode that was modern day stuff and dealing with the assassin and dropping the assassin in the Rancor pit and stuff like that. It's like it comes back to me, but it is like, oh yeah, that's right. That was a thing that barely got like shown in the series, and so I think it's just another way that like the storytelling pacing of the show suffered, is that we didn't get like vibes of what Boba Fett is actually doing as a crime boss, as a daimyo, whatever a daimyo is.
What did Jabba the Hutt do outside of like do things in his palace? But what about what happened in Jabba's palace? It's like, oh, this guy's in charge of all of Tatooine.
I mean, I like for that, I will say that he at least has like the weight and name of the Hutts behind him. And the money to pay enforcers and bounty hunters and stuff like that.
But before you don't
see Boba Fett doing any of that. Like Boba Fett just Boba Fett basically takes over the territory by killing the one guy that had not really been doing much with it for the 5 years in the interim anyway.
That's part of the problem is that Bib Fortuna had lost such a grip.
Right.
That it's Boba Fett thinks, oh, I'm walking back to like the Hutt, like Jabba the Hutt's territory and everything. It's like, actually, no, while you've been like you were being swallowed by a Sarlacc, Bib Fortuna failed at keeping everything together. And so now it turns out that what you thought you were walking into and inheriting isn't all of that at all. And that's what the first couple episodes do, is they set that up. And it sets up when Boba's trying to like then like re-centralize power under himself. These are the things he's encountering. Then the twins show up, which I admit the twins are like a dumb red herring that show up and don't do much.
But it's also, I mean, it's Boba's whole like, I'm going to lead with respect, not fear, or lead through respect, not fear. And it's like, okay, but what are you doing to make these people respect you? Like eventually, you kind of turn on like the guy who comes saying you want like these kids to stop stealing your water. You go and say, hey, stop jacking up your prices on water and make it like he does like a thing there and kind of gets the mods in under his like, that's like the first thing he does where I'm like, okay, I guess that's like a cool idea. But just so much of like the Boba-ness of this show, I think was just the modern day Boba-ness of this show was underwritten and underpresented.
I'm totally with you there, because I think I won't go too long on it because I think we kind of covered it, but I think the modern day storyline in terms of the Boba story needed like a lot more time and a lot more work, because even like I don't think they build the Pikes up very well as being like bad guys, and then like I don't think they handle Boba and his like some of the things he does very well, and then even with his crew, like I'm okay with some of the mod stuff, and then I do like Chrysanthemum, and like, but it's this thing of like he should have this super badass crew that we're like in love with, and I'm like okay with some of them, and that's like only the level that we're at for me with like his crew. But I feel like they could have used the time to build up the crew and then working as a crew and having adventures and doing crime stuff and like helping people in the town, like you said. Like they could have really told a lot more in Mos Espa than just being like, oh, we're going to jet over to this side of the galaxy, or oh, we're going to do like a flashback. Like there's just a lot more I wish I would have seen before we got to this like big end battle with all these people, and then it just kind of ends and wraps up.
Yeah.
Well, but here's the problem that you're going to run into with that is if you like with what you got out of his crew and you're like, I'm kind of okay with some of them. What if they spent so much time on the people that you're only okay with some of them on? You're going to be like, they spent too much time with that. I would have rather they showed us more flashback stuff. Like, it's really comes down to this show tried to do too much for so many people. And like, they tried to do too much they tried to cover too much ground, too much different kind of styles of storytelling. And for some people, and it sounds like for most people, it didn't go well.
Yeah.
But it's
like, I think there's just a lot of missed opportunities. I think a lot of it is like, they were trying to cover too much ground for the amount of time they were going to put into this. And ultimately it's like, well, you could have put more time into it. Like, why? Like, all of this is issues of your own making. Like, if you knew this was how many episodes you were going to have, you should have cut some of those threads that you were trying to tell. Or if you knew you wanted to tell those stories, you should have put more episodes into it or something to make that work in a better way. And I think there were a lot of elements that left me wanting. And like, to a degree, I will cede that it is a TV show, and so they are going to be limited, in those, formats. Like, I don't know the amount of, like, I want to say one of the things in that first season of The Mandalorian, they talked about the idea of like, every episode was like $1 million episode or something like that, absurd kind of like money put behind it. Maybe they're still getting that kind of money, maybe they're not. And that's certainly going to affect the, like, there were definitely elements in the final episode where I was like, oh man, like, there are just like, when all of the townspeople that show up and Boba's like entire crew are fitting behind like that one little speeder, I'm like, oh, there are just so few people. Like, there's no way Boba and his squad can make it out of this. Like, he just doesn't have enough muscle to manage 3 families plus the Pikes. Like, of course they're going to get the upper hand. And so like, I like, in that regard, it's like, okay, so you don't have the resources to do a full out fight. So like, put it into a more strategic thing. Like, Fennec Shan going off and taking out like all of the heads of the family, I think is like a great move. And plays to the strengths of Ming-Na Wen, as well as like that character as has been established. And doesn't come across like, oh, that looks like that would look cooler if this was like the movie version of this story. So yeah, like, again, ultimately had a good time. I'm excited for more Star Wars stuff. But I just think I think there were a number of places where this did leave me wanting more, or just different or better choices. So let's go ahead and wrap
Oh,
up.
I haven't.
Oh, okay. Give your final piece. I mean, like, I definitely thought you really had a great time with this. You enjoyed it. Clearly it didn't work for other people, but yeah, go ahead and say your piece.
I said that
Cam.
more so as a response to some stuff that you guys were saying rather than my own piece. My final piece on it is like, yeah, I really enjoyed this. I think that this was a really fun. I had a fun time watching it. Like, I marathoned through the last 6 episodes. I had a great time with it. I have gone into explanations of like things that I loved out of it, and there's a lot of stuff I didn't go over that I loved out of this show. One thing I will say is that I think that a lot, like anything, when you're going to bring in Boba Fett is such a damned if you do, damned if you don't character. That if you like Trevor, you said, I wish they'd made different choices or a better choice. And it's like, but at the same time, I can see people's alternative criticism to it being, well, they like, and I mentioned it when Frank brought up that stuff too. Like, I honestly don't think that, and this is part of the problem, I don't think you can get a slam dunk or like an out of this, like, just everybody's going to be on board and stoked about Star Wars anymore. I think that there's too much criticism within the zeitgeist for people just to be like, oh, this was a really great thing. I think that there's a lot of analysis behind it, but I'd want to get away from that. Sorry. I want to get away from that. I don't want to be more.
Well, yeah. just as a quick rebuttal to that, I would say, like,
sure,
especially when The Mandalorian shows up in this, I thought we saw a lot of people being like, The Mandalorian is a really good show. And like, a lot of people love The Mandalorian. And it's almost like The Mandalorian is what people have wanted Boba Fett to be for years. And so the fact that they basically took all of that and put that on this other character and have made us love this other character over the last couple of years, and a lot of that's going to be, because of also his relationship with Grogu, and everybody loves Baby Yoda. But I think, like, yeah, it's definitely whatever you put on Boba Fett is not going to live up to the 40 years of mythologizing that character, who is a very small actual character in the original trilogy. The fact that you get like more time with Boba Fett in, the first, like he probably spends more time in Bacta tanks in this series than we see the entirety of him in the original trilogy.
You're correct.
Now I'm actually very curious about what the time frame of that would be.
There's no way with how much time we saw him in a Bacta tank that it's not longer than all of his scenes put together.
Yeah.
Films.
So there's absolutely that was a tough uphill climb for them to do, but it is still like, I would say that even within this show, we see instances of largely universally loved elements of Star Wars, Baby Yoda and Mando himself, that I don't think it was impossible for them to, come across and make this work. I just don't think they did.
That's the thing. I don't think it's impossible either, but I also think that there's too much sway. Like the problem the show has, in my opinion, is there's too much sway in the pendulum. It either leans too hard into this or it leans too hard into that, and part of that is the fact that is Robert Rodriguez. You're either in or you're out when it comes to that sort of stuff. And I'm in on that sort of thing. But I also did not. I'm kind of like, I did not expect to be coming into this and towards the end of this being so combative. But when it comes down to the show, I think that this is a great piece of Star Wars. Maybe that's because there's a lot of other parts of Star Wars that are really, really bad. And I should say bad. They're just not as great as other parts of Star Wars. And I think for this I do not think the Book of Boba Fett lends itself to the side of things of being not as great. I think that it does enough to give you asked, what's the future for Boba Fett, and Fennec Shank. I think that it's just this is what Boba Fett is until Boba Fett eventually. I don't think Boba Fett's going to lose power and then we're going to be like, oh, now he's back to bounty hunting. I think if Boba Fett loses his grip on Tatooine from now on, I think that's the end of Boba Fett. And I think that's what's the end of Boba Fett? The end of the Book of Boba Fett is the end of Boba Fett himself. I think that's fine. That's thematic. It works.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be Boba Fett's decided that he's going to take the leg up and take the next job, take that job promotion from underling to crime, underling to boss. And this is the trials and tribulations of what that is and this situation that he's in. And so I enjoyed that. I understand other people didn't. But I think what really boils down for me is that, how do I put this? I came into the Book of Boba Fett not expecting much because I don't know what you're going to do with Boba Fett as a character. And what they ended up doing and what they ended up succeeding in doing is making me care about what happens to Boba Fett, which is something that never was not something that existed before. To the point where in the expanded universe, I groaned every time I read a book and Boba Fett showed up. Because Boba Fett was just this unbearably too cool for school character in the expanded universe canon. And for them to give me an opportunity to like Boba Fett and think that he's cool. And he's trying to do something that's kind of not in his nature. Because he learned some lessons along the way into getting to where he is at, and he's trying to implement those lessons. And it's the push and give of all of that.
So I think that you kind of discussing that reminded me of, I think one of my favorite conversations in the show actually was him talking to Fennec in the flashback after he saves Fennec, talking about what he's after, what he's trying to do. And the idea of he's tired of being a gun for hire and being sent out to his death from people that are dumber than him or whatever. And my issue, I think, is that he doesn't make better decisions than they did as a boss himself. And I don't think they do that intentionally to be it's harder than you thought it was going to be or whatever.
I thought it was intentional. That's my takeaway from it. I thought it was intentional. I think the fact that they're Boba Fett, you have these hard choices to make, and you make the choice that's it makes you feel better about yourself, but it's not the right choice.
If it was intentional, then I would have needed him to reckon with that and him to have a self-realization of oh, this is harder than I thought it was going to be, or something like that.
I felt that he does in the last episode when he says that he has that little mini conversation with Ming Na Wen, and he says, this isn't for us. And she goes, yeah, but if not us, who? It's kind of like this idea of reminding him, like, yeah, remember when you said that to me back in the desert?
Yeah, I guess
I felt that was a good callback to that. And it is a notice of that. For me, that was a moment of growth of like, oh yeah, this is harder than I thought it was going to be, because it's a callback to the first episode when he's going through and making a big deal about going through his territory and stuff. And I thought it was like, once again, I think this is like, this, and honestly, it just might be, I watched most of this compiled together.
Mm-hmm.
I did not wait week after week for this. And I think that might be why I'm so high on it.
So maybe Book of Boba Fett works better as a 3-hour movie than as, 7 episodes over the course of 7 weeks. That's fair.
We only know if you,
honestly.
Yeah, I think if you guys sit down and we all watch it, like within that 7-hour chunk, that 6-hour chunk, and we enjoy this as like a Justice League Snyder cut type situation, we might, like, you guys might be more hot on it than you think. Because I also think a lot of times with TV shows, like, this felt like something that you should watch back to back. I do not know if I would have liked this as much if I had done the week to week thing versus Mandalorian. I did enjoy having the week to week break. This does not feel like it because of also like the pace that it goes at. I don't think that it works that way. That's besides the point. I've said what I wanted to say. I really like it.
Fair enough. Report card. Where would we grade this stuff from A+ to F? Frank, what do you want to give a grade for this?
I think for me, I'm gonna go with B-. I kind of debated like B or B-, and I didn't want to be like too hard on it, but I think like it is definitely just within the B's, and I think even on the lower end of like it's not like awful, like it is competently made, and it is like it's obviously like well shot. You can hear it. There's no booms in like the shot or anything, so it's like it's not like a terrible B movie, but I think it doesn't hit the highs of like a lot of the other best parts of Star Wars, and like the Mandalorian season 1 and 2 are like A tier for me, and I think this is definitely like a step below that for sure.
Mm-hmm. For me, I don't remember what I gave the first episode when Logan and I did that. I think we were in like the C+ territory or something like that. And I say this is an easy B for me, maybe B+. So it did improve over the course of over the course of the series from that first episode. But again, I think as a Star Wars thing, I really enjoy this. I had a good time with this. As a Boba Fett thing, it doesn't earn that B, but I'm grading as a Star Wars thing, and I really enjoyed the Star Wars-ness of it. So it gets that it gets there, and yeah, there is definitely a lot of like other things that I'm bringing into it from elements of the Clone Wars that I like, elements of the Mandalorian that I like, and stuff like that. But overall, it gets a solid B for me. How about you, Cam?
Weirdly enough, I thought you guys were going to be much lower on it, which is one of the reasons I was fighting so hard for this. I'm a B+. I'm in the B+ range for it. Yeah, okay. I thought you guys were going to come in and be like,
no,
it was dog shit. It's a D. It's like, how are you scoring this lower than Attack of the Clones, people?
No. Again,
this is better than Attack of the Clones for sure.
Yeah, again, like I really enjoyed a lot of this. I just thought it had, again, a lot of missed opportunities that could have made it so much better.
Sure. Okay.
But I had a good time week in, week out, despite not watching 6 episodes in a burst like you did or something like that. I really enjoyed the series start to finish. I think especially again in those first few episodes had some real pacing issues in the split timelines, and then when we got to episode 5 that had no Boba, episode 6 that had Boba in a scene, but I don't think he has any dialogue in that scene. It's just like he's there while Fennec gives like exposition. It's like, how is this a Boba Fett show when 2 out of the 7 episodes barely have barely have Boba? Fine, I'm just going to disregard that and say this is a cool Star Wars thing, and that's kind of where I've been with it. So yeah, like I enjoyed the show, but again, I just think it has a lot of like, ooh, that could have been a better thing moments.
Cool. I don't know at what point during our podcast.
It's still nowhere near some of the shit that we've done on this show or some of the stuff we've reviewed on this. God, remember when we did Artemis Fowl, Cameron?
Oh my god. Oh my god, talk about an absolute dog shit movie. Yeah. Oh my god. Oh, that was such a bad one. Yeah, no, okay, cool. I don't know why I thought, like, at some point I thought the conversation had turned on me.
Oh, no.
That our conversation had turned on me, and all of a sudden I was the only one that liked this, and I was like, "How did this happen? Like, what happened?" And that's why I kind of like got like jumpy almost, and like how defensive I was.
Yeah.
Sorry, my bad, you guys.
Oh, okay.
I thought I lost like track of where everybody was feeling on it, and I all of a sudden felt very alone
And that was like
and attacked.
You said like, oh, I didn't think I was gonna get this combative. I was like, oh, I didn't feel like we've been combative. I thought like we've just been having kind of like a good discussion around the things that worked or didn't work for each of us. But
Fair.
yeah, it's still, I mean, it's still a cool, fun show that I think
Yeah.
we all enjoyed.
So it's still Star Wars. It's like the pizza thing.
Yeah.
Like you hit a certain level,
pizza.
you know.
Yeah. All right. Extra credit. Other suggestions, if you like this, would be Under the Helmet: The Legacy of Boba Fett, The Mandalorian, of course, Disney Galaxy Star Wars of The Mandalorian, kind of the behind the making, the making of The Mandalorian / behind the scenes, which I imagine there will eventually be a Disney Gallery for the Book of Boba Fett too, which I will be fascinated to see. Star Wars: The Clone Wars. The original trilogy there of A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi, and The Bad Batch are all your recommendations from Disney Plus. Extracurriculars. Anybody watching anything else on Disney Plus these days?
I went back and I started rewatching season 1 and 2 of The Mandalorian. Like after like episode, actually I think it was after episode 5 when he shows up, and now I was like that episode blew me away and was like a highlight of the show for me. So I was like, yeah, you know what, I want more of this guy. So I went back and rewatched it. And I want to say like both seasons are great. They still totally hold up, and I recommend a lot of people out there, if you did watch Boba Fett or Book of Boba Fett, I recommend going back to at least season 2 of The Mandalorian, because when Boba Fett shows up, it's a lot more interesting to watch that now that we already know basically everything that happened in between and how he got to that point.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it was just interesting because he has like the Tusken staff, and I'm like, oh, I know how he got that and like how it was made, and watching him beat up stormtroopers with it has like a cool new level.
Yeah, it was cool seeing just off of that. Like I think I because he was teased basically like when Fennec was shot in that first season episode or whatever. Like we see a person walking up to her to effectively save her, and I'm pretty sure like back then people were like, oh, that's Boba Fett. That's going to be Boba Fett. And so the fact that they held such restraint on like bringing him back into the series, and even teased it first with like Cobb Vanth from the armor and stuff. Like I appreciated that. And so there was almost like, I almost wish we'd seen a little bit more of like what the other parts of his journey. And I guess we do see him getting like the fire spray back and kind of helping set the stage for when he joins the Mandalorian and stuff. But it was definitely like cool to see them kind of fill in some of those gaps. But even that, I thought there was some, like, I thought there was more room to play in that space, in that timeline of things than we ended up getting. But
I agree with that as well.
So be it. Cam, you watching anything else on Disney Plus these days, or just lots of Book of Boba Fett?
I literally just binged all the Book of Boba Fett, and then I went through and watched a bunch of like, I've been watching a lot of like this special like behind the scenes stuff. Going back and watching some of like the round tables between the directors for Mandalorian, and I too am hoping for one of those for Book of Boba Fett.
Yeah.
Just like also lots of cool stuff. Like going back, and I rewatched like this morning. I went back and watched some clips from like episode 5, Book of Boba Fett, of just like kind of like gleaning more information from the scene when he's with the Enclave, and kind of getting more and more out of it, and also watching that sick ass duel again. Yeah. So
cool.
One thing before we leave, I forgot to highlight this because I love the theme song for Book of Boba Fett. Like when it does the ha, like the hey and the drum thing, like that hits so hard, and it's so much better than the Mandalorian theme, which just doesn't like, it's not, the Mandalorian theme's not bad, it just doesn't hit the same way. But man, when you get to episode 5 of Book of Boba Fett, and it's Din and he does the butcher shop thing, and then it does the hey, and it's like Return of the Mandalorian, like that's the best moment in the entire show for me. Like that, I had me so excited, and then that whole episode after that is just fantastic.
Yeah. Wait. So are you saying you prefer the Book of Boba Fett theme to the Mandalorian theme?
Yeah, like the theme music,
okay.
yeah, like because I love the way it just hits with like the drum, and then that like ha, and then it kind of
Well, like
keeps going. Like
the
I love that.
Okay.
we find out that's the Tuscan Raider like
I mean,
song and
yeah,
dance that they were doing.
that was like
So
I think I still prefer the Mandalorian's theme,
Sam.
but I appreciated thematically how the vocals play into the Book of Boba Fett theme as
Mhm.
we kind of got to know more about the Tusken Raider stuff. But yeah, it's still like it was still a weird like hearing vocals in a Star Wars theme is a little weird. I guess like I'm like selectively omitting like Duel of the Fates, which is obviously arguably like one of the best songs ever in Star Wars, a little
Yeah,
bit. But like it's a weird enough thing for me where I was like, oh, it's such a weird vibe to get in this theme, and I like each week when that would come up, I was like, I just miss the like I miss the like very Wild West vibes of the of the Mando's theme basically. But it did grow on me over the course of the season. I will say, I by the end I was like, okay, cool. Like I don't I'm not mad when the the episode ends and we go into the concept art stuff and get the theme and all that kind of stuff. Also, are you like concept art like continue to be just great parts of all these shows, getting to see kind of
absolutely.
all those little elements. So cool. Also shout outs to the fire spray killing the Sarlacc with the sonic bomb. um all right. Well, I guess that is going to do it for this episode of That D Plus Show. Thank you guys for joining me to discuss here the entirety of the first season, presumably first season. Who knows? Maybe the entirety of the Book of Boba Fett. No idea if it's going to come back or not. It definitely seems like they've left enough there to bring it back for more adventures of Dan Casey always calls him Robert Fettuccini and the Mod Squad. You can have them come back. Yeah. You can follow Cameron at Rev Cabot. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Cam?
Yes, my Game of the Year list, as in the actual article, is finally up on that nerdy site. It is a shorter read than you probably expect coming from something that I wrote. But I hope you enjoy it. And it's just kind of like a final kind of like the last thoughts that I have about Game of the Year and the games that I played. So go check it out.
Cool. You can follow Frank at Irrelevant Jokes. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Frank?
Yeah, just a quick shout out to our other podcast, That Nerdy Site Show. Our most recent episode is Cam and I just talking about some of the things we've been playing, and also I saw Jackass Forever, so we kind of chatted about that for a bit, and it was a good time catching up. So I recommend people check that episode out.
Yeah. I again thank you guys for stepping in doing that. I listened to it as because I basically like you sent me over the audio file. I went through and like edited out like I think just because of like the internet or something, there was a lot of like dead space in between
Yeah.
like transitions and stuff. So I cut a lot of those little bits out to just tighten it up a little bit. But I enjoyed the conversation you guys had over the course. Even though you, as always happens when I'm not on these episodes, you guys immediately just crap on me and be like, thank God Dad's not here. We're just gonna run free. And then like 10 minutes in, you both like forget how to podcast and stuff. I'm like, what do you like? You just keep the action going. Just figure out what you're going to talk about. Talk about another thing, or end it. Whatever you're going to do it. And you're
Dude,
like, how do we do a podcast?
I haven't had to host like honestly host like a real podcast in so long. I'm like, shoot, how did I do this before? Because I had a successful podcast before.
Yeah.
Like, what happened to my hosting skills? They're just gone.
It was definitely like, there was a moment where I was like, yeah, this is the first time in well over a year that I have not been the host of the show, apart from like the handful of little conversational podcasts that we did last year.
But those aren't real podcasts.
Exactly.
Those are just conversations.
Exactly. Those were barely a thing.
They have a single topic, and that's all that's talked about. It's not a real podcast.
But it was a good episode. So yes, absolutely shout out to this week's episode of That Nerdy Site Show. You can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey. The other thing I will shout out, I will echo Cameron's shout out for his Game of the Year piece. Frank's also up there. If you've not caught Frank's top 10 games of 2021, you can go check out that written piece. And I'll also shout out our other Friday series that I admittedly did not know was going to be a Friday series when we recorded this last week. But you can, if you're listening to this the day this goes live, come back in about what is that like 9 hours for Friday Night Dying Light, our Let's Play series that Cam is doing every Friday evening. His journey through Dying Light 2 continues. You can go catch the first episode of that right now, and the second episode sometime later today.
It is the only Friday Night Lights themed
Dying
playthrough.
Light playthrough, yes.
Yeah, Dying Light 2 playthrough.
Facts.
Yep. There's none of them are out there.
Weird.
Nobody out there doing it.
None of the other influencers out there were like, you know what I'm gonna mash this up with? Friday Night Lights.
A show that hasn't been relevant for more than a decade.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Yeah.
As long as it's in your heart, that's all that matters.
Hey, man, remember, bare eyes, full hearts, can't lose.
There you go.
All right?
So yeah, go check that out, as well as our Saturday show. You can catch here on YouTube, or rather on YouTube, youtube.com/thatnerdysite. That Bond show. This weekend's episode will be Diamonds Are Forever, and then we'll have a big fun one the following week where both Cameron and Frank join me and Logan to discuss Live and Let Die. So yeah, go check out that as well. You can catch all of us over at That Nerdy Site, or go to thatnerdysite.com for all the latest from us. Once again, if you liked what you heard, please like, rate, review, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. Thank you for joining us. As always, stay nerdy, be good to each other. Class dismissed. May the Force be with you.
And also with you.